Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Podcast. I am Scott McMahon. Very excited about this show. We've got Kerry, McQuisten, and Joel Pawloski. Kerry ran for governor in 22, and we were talking a little bit before the show. She first noticed that there was an issue with, with people that were in the party not really behaving like Republicans. You said in 2021, is that was about right, when you were mayor at Baker City?
That is correct. It started right at the beginning of my term as mayor, just right after we started being effective and doing things. Imagine that.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Right. And so who were the people that came up, and what happened? What did you see?
Okay, but just by way of a little bit of background about the Baker County Republicans, my mom was the county chair at that time, and she had just started her last term and had announced that she was retiring and wanted to kind of phase out and go into retirement. She's in her 70s. And we had a gentleman there at the time who was a vice chair of the party, a guy named Jake Brown. And Jake had been to maybe a meeting and a half within the last 2 years. So he was very inactive in the party, didn't really do very much. Our folks got together back during Kate Brown's COVID lockdowns and decided it was time to flip Baker City's council from blue to red, because they had shut down our city. They had closed everything down, kowtowed to Kate Brown and her mandates, and it did not represent our people. And we did that. The Baker County Republicans was a very functional group, lots of good, solid PCPs involved in the community, and they flipped that council with our candidates to red. And so within probably a month of being elected, we started really pushing back hard. And you would think that the friction we would have gotten back would have been from the local far left, not many of those, but a few. And it wasn't. It was coming from Jake and the people within our party. It was like watching a sleeper cell activated.
I watched some videos. Jake Brown's got a YouTube channel, and every single video, I went back about a year and a half, and every single video he is just bashing your mom. It's just every other sentence is your mom's name.
Yeah, that's what he did.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense for someone who's retiring out. So the first thing we did when we opened City Hall. We opened it. We were one of the first cities to open it up in Oregon. And if you're a conservative, that should be a little bit exciting, and it wasn't. What we started hearing instead was Jake, and he hooked up with this guy named Kenny Hackett. So Kenny Hackett was another PCP who was, involved in the party to some degree, with a criminal record that spanned quite a bit. He's now a 4-time convicted felon. And these two teamed up, and we started hearing from business owners up and down Main Street and Broadway in Baker City saying, hey, these two guys were just in our businesses and they were trashing you, started little bits of smear. Gosh, what are they doing on council? Does this sound right? Just a little undermining going on there. And
Deliberately to the business owner?
Yeah, they were deliberately targeting business owners to badmouth us, trying to just take away our support in the community with the Republican conservative business owners. And we started hearing that. And when we wrote a resolution and had that passed, basically defying Kate Brown, we hit national news. We were on Fox and everything else at the time.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was big. We declared ourselves a common sense sanctuary in Baker City.
Yeah.
And that should be something that you would think a conservative Republican would be happy about. Instead, they formed a group called Baker County United. And there's nothing united about tearing down other conservatives, Baker County United. And what they did was form a group of other people in the community and start convincing these folks that something horribly corrupt was happening with us on city council and within the Baker County Republicans. And that's when those videos and those emails and the attacks that were constant started.
Gene says he's upset. And I think that that was my impression in watching those videos. Like, there's just something seriously wrong with this guy. And like you said, especially, at a time when she's not up for re-election, she's already said she's retiring out. Like, why make her public enemy number one? Why do you think he did that?
Because we were an effective group. So I can tell you, since that group did manage to take over, most of the PCPs who were there at the time, and it was, half of the group and better, have just thrown their hands up in the air. You know, a lot of us have gone over to the Baker County Republican Women. A lot of folks have just quit entirely and do things, you know, privately. And that's because we value the Republican platform and the values in it, and we can't let those slide. And so when an organization has kind of self-corrupted, you go on the outside of it, you know, and you work towards your goals then. And our goals are eventually to flip Oregon red. That's the goal.
Yeah. And yeah, I've seen several other counties here in Michigan and elsewhere do the same thing. In Greenville, South Carolina, that's what they've done. They just created a Republican club outside of the party to do Republican things because the party was no longer interested in doing those kinds of things.
Yeah. And you can see that these are not Republican things in reality. So, you know, a good conservative will say, okay, I back the blue. I support victims' rights. They do not team up with criminals and support criminal rights and then form almost a mob to continue attacking people. That is the exact opposite of a conservative Christian value system. And we saw that in Baker. Other examples is when we put through a resolution, basically a Second Amendment preservation resolution in Baker. We would hear criticism from the Republicans, the Baker County United Republicans, about this. That didn't make sense either. There was a gun grab measure that was up, and the city of Bend, which has gone very blue, came out and endorsed this awful gun grab measure. So we did the exact opposite. You know, we said, don't vote for this measure. You know, we're not endorsing it. We got mocked by that. When liberals would come to city council, they would support the far left liberals on social media, put yard signs supporting the liberal candidates in their yards. This is not a Republican action. And then
so Jake Powers or Jake, it's Don Powers, Jake Bryan, right? Jake Brown. So Jake Brown would actually endorse the far left people.
What he would do is he would back off and he would send Kenny Hackett forward. And Kenny Hackett would then get on social media and straight out, I've got screenshot after screenshot backing some of the most far left Democrats in the community. We have, I have pictures, you know, of them putting out yard signs and their friends, part of the Baker County United, in their yards. Didn't make any sense. Wow. And so when we were very effective and I ended up running, you know, declaring my candidacy for governor, that's when Joel comes into the picture because I met him kind of midstream along the way, and then he became a target.
And Joel, were you already the county chair at Marion County at that point?
I was not. No, I was just a PCP. And so I first met Kerry when she came to Marion County to interview and to speak with the PCPs here. And then we met again at the platform convention in October of 21. And it was a couple of months after that, I started helping in her campaign. And that was all pretty low key at first. And then starting in February, I started getting told you have to get off Facebook. You can't participate in Kerry's campaign. You have to change the way you're speaking about Kerry. You have to support a different candidate. Other PCPs that at the time I thought were, you know, friends, but it never made sense to me. And I'm always been my own man. And then it really blew up when we had the Reawaken tour in Salem, Oregon, which my church, the River Church, hosted at a local sports complex here. And the afternoon, like spur of the moment thing, Kerry passes me and says, Joel, we don't have a photographer. You got to come take pictures. And I went over and took pictures with her and Eric Trump and Solomon was there and some other folks. And once that got out onto social media, it was bad. I was a communist sympathizer, like instantly, you know, and people who never knew me,
communists,
would say things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, you're labeled a communist. Is that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are still people who say that. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a 30-year Army veteran, retired lieutenant colonel. Okay. I have had friends personally killed by communists.
Right.
I am the last person on this planet and it's amazing to me. But no one ever asks these questions. They just attack.
Right. And they make these kinds of attacks as they themselves are the ones that are acting like communists.
Yes. And they do it always with this sense of moral superiority too.
Yeah. That's yep. Trump 24 says they had many reawaken tours in Michigan, and so was Mike Flynn at that?
Yes, he was.
So was there anything else that came out of that reawaken tour? So
that was the first time I had a serious interaction with Don. Excuse me, Don Powers.
That was the first time I ever met Don Powers. Actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had crossed paths with him previously, just hi bye kind of thing, and so this is an interesting story, and I guess I'll start it. But he first approached me in the afternoon, very excited, because he had told me the first thing he tells me is that he had stopped Kerry McQuisten from speaking at the Reawaken tour, and no politicians were speaking. I knew that in advance. So he didn't stop anything from happening. He was flat out lying to me and or fabricating, trying to puff something up. And then the next thing he said was that Solomon had tried to get him and Mark Thielman thrown out of the event. I didn't know Solomon was there. And my actual answer was, who? That was my whole answer, because I didn't even recognize Solomon. I hadn't met Solomon yet at that point. I met him that afternoon.
Anybody that's not in Oregon, Solomon is Solomon Yu, who was the RNC committee man. Well, he still is, but he was just
until July.
Right. So, and he just bowed down or backed out of his reelection bid in order to ensure that Don Powers would not get elected as RNC.
Yeah, correct.
He bought about 6 months of time is what he did.
Right.
Yeah. And then the rest of that is that he told me that he had been saved from being thrown out by Solomon by his friend Joe Oltman, who's another podcaster who was there to speak. And so Don Powers is I didn't
Oltman.
Yes.
Interesting.
And Joe Oltman, I'm gonna assume, because he contacted me in Telegram, and yeah, that's another story. We'll get to that later, or not.
Joe Oltman contacted you on Telegram?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, he came on to a Telegram chat in Oregon as the Oregon only one, and stumped for Don Powers to be national committee man.
Really? So he did that just a couple weeks ago. He was.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you think that they had a pre-existing relationship even before that Reawaken tour?
Oh, before Don ever showed up here? Yes, absolutely.
Where was he from? Oregon, or was he from someplace else?
Joe? No, he's not from Oregon.
Don Powers.
Oh, that's a good question.
What do you know about his background?
So Don Powers, he does have a criminal background spanning 15, 20 years in Oregon, which he's blamed on his now ex-wife. It's ridiculous. And so you can see that he was here. He was in and out of the court system, in and out and in and out. He worked at a light bulb company in Clackamas County. He eventually parted ways with that company, started his own company, was not a registered voter, had been out of state for a while, popped into the Republican Party in 2021. So it looks from his audit from the Clackamas County clerk that he had been registered as a non-affiliated and just never voted, never turned in his ballot. Probably when he went to do something at the DMV, that would be my guess. He then registered as a Republican in the late summer of 2021. And that was the exact point that he all of a sudden came into the Oregon Republican Party and was given an appointment as co-chair of ORP's Election Integrity Committee. So this guy had never voted before. He didn't vote for the first time until the primary.
No history.
No history. Of 2022 is when he finally did vote in a primary in Oregon, or any election, as far as we can tell. but he's already for months now headed up this election integrity
But
committee.
2 years later, he's running for RNC committeeman.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Once
Joe
a month.
Olson is stumping for him.
Yes.
Jane says that's one of their buzzwords, communist. And, in watching their videos, some other buzzwords or status quo, that's so common in every state. They say no to the status quo.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And
It's like Mao's Cultural Revolution, where you come in and you have to erase any knowledge of the past, any history, any skills. That has to be wiped away so that you can control the person taking over, the people taking over the new establishment, they're calling it here in Oregon.
Mhm.
Yes.
And Jason Mickelborg, he's here in Michigan. He says, sounds like some of Karamo's ex-staff. So Karamo, she was our state chair here, and her inner circle, many of them had never been involved in politics. They didn't know anything about anything. And all of a sudden they've got roles like chief of staff for the state chair. But this is pretty extraordinary. So he is, what is his position now? I mean, this rise out of nowhere.
He is still the co-chair of the Election Integrity Committee.
Okay.
He is also the chair of the Human Trafficking Committee.
Really?
For the ORP. We have a Human Trafficking Committee. Yes.
That's a brand
Which
new
is interesting.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with ORP, nothing to do with anything. And suddenly this new committee has just come out of the blue with him having that title.
This is just absolutely fascinating. The two biggest, I was tweeting this morning about how election integrity has just been used as a major grift in the same way that Black Lives Matter has been used, that use the DEI thing where, they create for their audience, they create this sense of guilt and the sense of need. And if you just pay us, then we'll take care of this problem. And that's exactly what they're doing with election integrity. It's just, they're approaching a different jersey, and they say, we're engaging all these lawsuits. We're going to make our elections more secure, but they don't do a dang thing. They don't do anything at all, because the only thing that you could do to make our elections more secure is to elect Republicans into the state House and Senate and into the governor's position, so that you can actually get new laws that make the new state laws that make the elections more secure. But they're not doing that. They're not working towards that goal. They're just trying to grift off of it. They don't want to actually solve the problem.
Yeah. In Oregon, you can do an initiative petition where you can change. It's the only way to change the state constitution is by a vote of the people. And you could do an initiative petition in Oregon to change the Oregon constitution to handwritten or, hand ballots, 1 day mail or no mail-in ballots, 1 day voting, the whole 9 yards that they want. And you could do it completely on the up and up, and all it would take is effort. And none of them have ever even suggested doing it.
Wow. Yeah. Of
So
course.
what they have done is file a couple election integrity lawsuits. And the first step in that process that I've noticed is, because election integrity is critical. If we don't have fair, honest elections, we lose our results. And so everyone knows this.
Yeah.
That's where the grifting comes in, because it seems very plausible. Okay, we're going to fight this. And they're talking and saying the right words, and they get what I call political cover to come in. They get 1 or 2 people in a state come in who are very credible people, who are honest, who have voted correctly, and that's their political cover. And they come on as co-plaintiffs in these lawsuits. The lawsuits, if you actually read them, they never have any kind of legal standing whatsoever in these suits. And so we've got 2 going in Oregon. One's been tossed. One is still kind of midway from being tossed. But it costs the state taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars for the state to go through the process and defend these. Right. And there's no outcome to these that affects anything.
Nope.
Anything.
Right. Because the remedy that they ask for is impossible for a judge to give, too.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. So Trump 24 says roughly 15 minutes in, and the time frame and storyline matches Michigan again. Christina Karamo surrounded her leadership with criminals also, and that is, the criminal element is just crazy. I mean, what Trump 24 is talking about is the executive director had a past where he had been had RICO charges against him, and And
Nice.
then the person that she tried to bring in as her communications director was on parole for $120,000 worth of embezzlement. And he's still on probation. And in South Carolina, the director there, the head guy there, he was in 2014 was convicted $950,000 in embezzlement. Yeah, it's crazy. Also familiar. Melanie says, this is interesting. Cromwell knew about human trafficking too. And yeah, the human trafficking thing is another grift. It's a big time grift. And Jim Caviezel is actually involved in that with the movie, The Sound of what is it? Somebody.
So was it Freedom?
Okay. And it just came out just a week or two ago that the guy who he played actually he's being sued by this woman that is supposedly a child trafficker, but she's saying that he was actually the one trafficking children, and that that he was framing her. And it seems to be very credible evidence to support that. So it's just like one grift after another. It's crazy, and that Don Powers is associated with both of those is nuts. Michael says, having been through this division, what have you learned about these tactics and how would you handle it differently? That's a great question. Who wants to take it?
Yeah, I'll start because so I was elected in chair in November of 22. And so in January of 23 is when the attacks against me first started with, slanderous rumors. And I hadn't done anything, right? No activity really to speak of at that point. But my, folks that I associated with, Kerry and others, were fairly well known. So it was important to pressure me and maybe make me go away. I'm not that easy. So then after that, it escalated to I was actually contacted by a local reporter who asked me for the name, asked me who two people were, and I told that local reporter who they were, and she told me they're working to recall you. This was early March of 23, and once again hadn't done anything except change the website.
Is there a recall mechanism in the bylaws to recall?
Yes, there is. There is. It's in Marion County. It's actually pretty strict. You have to do something like donate to a Democrat and work on their campaign to be recalled. Wow. All right. It's very specific. I helped write that.
You're a communist.
And I wrote that with me in mind, by the way. Okay. Because I knew how it was being abused in other places. So I helped make it very strict. Anyway, so the next thing that happened was the Solomon U recall came out. And that's when things really blew up bad. I was accused of hiding the Solomon U recall information from the Marion County PCPs because two Marion County PCPs were secretly handing it out at the meeting in April that we had. And they were then attempting to ask me loaded questions about it on a chat. And then, of course, I didn't actually know exactly what they were referring to. I had seen other attacks on against Solomon online, and I referred to those. And of course, I was lying and hiding things, and the accusation happened, and then it snowballed up until May 15th. May 12th, Rona McDaniel was here in Oregon. And she was having a chairs only event. When I arrived at that chairs only event, Don Powers, Jake Brown, the Washington County chair, Tracy Honnell, who's the national committee woman and was just reelected national committee woman, and Rona McDaniel were all in close conversation. When I walked in the room, they scattered like quail. It was like obvious they didn't want me to see them together. I mean, Jake literally ran out the door away from me.
Wow.
It was
With
like
Ron
very obvious. Talking to Rona McDaniel. Yes. He was just a PCP. This was supposed to be a county chairs only meeting. All right. So that happened. couple of days later, we were having a rally, and one of the helpful people for them took a run at me. And when I mean that, I mean took a run at me Antifa style, where you run up to someone and at the last second slow up and, you know, barely touch them or touch them lightly and try and get them to overreact. Well, he did that twice. And that was then I was supposed to overreact to that. From that point on, I did check with the state police, which were covering there at the steps of the Capitol, that what was on video, that became an incident. And the next month was solid, all of them everywhere. I had filed a false police report against this person, okay, which was never filed. All right. And then I had committed that crime and I needed to resign immediately. Okay. And there were calls from multiple chairs, including the Washington County chair and the Marion County vice chair, for me to resign because of this event. Okay. I also told the Marion County vice chair to resign too. I told her to resign because, you know, she was working in concert with these folks and still is. So yeah.
So that was a no-win situation for you because
yes,
we're trying to get you to react so that you would push them or something and to try to get them away so that then they could file charges against you.
Yes.
But since they actually touched you,
yes,
you
I didn't move.
Right.
I didn't move. I didn't react. I didn't do anything.
Good for you. In Arizona, the same thing happened to D4 chair Dan Farley. Brian Ferentz goaded him, like just tormented him for like an hour straight. Dan lost his patience and he kind of shoved him away from him and walked out the door. And he ended up getting the video footage and freeze framed it with his hand right on his chest and filed charges for assault. He spent well over $10,000 defending himself in court.
I have no doubt at all. That's what would have happened if I had pushed back or done. They did in Baker County as well.
They did the same thing in Baker several times. So what they would do is they would mob meetings. I actually walked through when they were actually planning in a room next door to come into an event, disrupt it. They were laughing, saying how fun it was going to be to disrupt the event. And they did. They came in until the point we had to actually call the police to come get these people out. And then, they called the police. They're shutting down our right to free speech. They're shutting down all of our constitutional rights. Look at these tyrants. But they'd set it up to plan it so that you couldn't have your event. They came into a central committee meeting, and this resulted actually, and we had a nice, almost donated office on Main Street. And they came in a mob into that meeting. They picketed out front. They left notes on cars. They went around the block hawking, and it scared the other tenants in that building to the point that the landlord pulled the lease, pulled the office space. One of the last things I had happen was actually after a central committee meeting, and we ended up having to take out a stalking protective order for about 90 days. It was in place against this guy. It was Kenny Hackett. And they had set this up after a meeting. One of my friends heard him talking to this lady, one of the PCPs, and she had a walker. She was older. She came into a room where several of us were just talking alone in this room with a shut door. And she came in with this walker, walked up to me, slammed the walker down on my foot, started hit me with the walker. And we knew right then that we were being set up. It was a setup. And so I went like this with my left hand and just put it out to stop her like this. Didn't shove her, didn't do anything. She went walking around, came back out. Her husband had come in first saying, if you infringe in my right to exist, I will eliminate yours or eliminate you or something. He had a sign around his neck that he was flashing at us. About 6 hours later, this lady goes to the emergency room, calls the police, says that she's basically been assaulted, that I have assaulted her. And I'm still, mayor at this time. I've assaulted this lady and I've injured her. She just had some kind of surgery. In the middle of talking to the Baker City police, she trips up and admits that she's the one who came with her walker. And it's unbelievable, these people, that she did this. And then I get a call asking if I would like to press charges against her. And so the whole thing eventually gets dropped, but then they do something associated with those called a wrap-up smear. And the wrap-up smear is where they write a statement and they take it to the media, at which they did. It was a mayor assaults elderly disabled woman. I'm standing here in this room talking. And so here's this headline going. They reported me to DHS trying to get me on some sort of database or watch list that is normally reserved for elderly caregivers or foster system. And this poor guy from DHS calls me up. He says, "Hey, have you ever provided foster care or care for the elderly?" No. Well, there's a report against you. So it's anything they can do. The last thing they did was walk up in city council and use their time as citizens to try to generate this accusation in public to see if they can generate more headlines. So there's a pattern using law enforcement trying to set up confrontation and then setting up a media headline to smear people. And I think they're using that consistently state by state.
Yeah. And this is a, Claire Solinsky type tactic,
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And after my event in May, I was investigated by the ORP, the Oregon Republican Party, and that investigation concluded in September with a executive committee meeting that was, according to a person who was there. I'll just say I have the entire recording of the meeting. So I know every word that was said by every single person there. And I just broke that news today. So I've had it for months. All right. And so anyway, so I hope somebody's nervous about that, because people in that meeting where I was being attacked, or I should say the investigation was being revealed. And I'll get to the punchline on this, did things like defend the slander that was against me, and I was supposedly having multiple affairs, and that was a routine thing that just kept happening over and over and over again. We got to the point where we were making a joke about it because I needed a spreadsheet to keep up with the affairs that I was having.
Same.
Yes. And it's just routine, and it just like throws it out there on social media. Oh, I heard this thing, and and there's no truth to it whatsoever. So that happened October. The ORP chair kind of didn't understand exactly what was happening at first with the investigation and where they wanted to go with that, and he ended up shutting it down at that meeting. And then October at our platform convention, he apologized to me for that. And while that apology was happening, Don Powers was in my RV talking to two Marion County PCPs, referring to me as the cancer that needed to be removed. I can't make this stuff up. This is just too crazy. And there's about 20 witnesses to that. There were people that were sitting around a fire pit outside the RV. Don didn't know it was my RV. I walked into it afterwards, right after the apology, and saw him there talking to my friends. And I'd heard him through the window, which was wide open. And I was very nice to him. And it was just too funny to me. But yeah, and he's worked hard to get a lot of chairs out of their positions around the state. Yeah. And he keeps saying he has a constant theme that he repeats on social media, one county at a time. And he repeats that often, so that he just lets you know. And he said it to me, one county at a time, and to answer to me for something that he doesn't, like that I'm doing. And I'll give you what he doesn't like. Last year, we won 90.4% of the elections that we were involved in. We went 21 for 23, including shutting down some really egregious taxes that were being proposed and a way out of control school board. We flipped 3 school boards, completely flipped them, went 100% wins on those school boards. And we won 2 out of 3 in the Salem-Kaiser school district, which is the second largest in the state. And nothing gets them more upset than that.
You're absolutely right. You're completely on the target with that. And that is, Cindy says, this is a nationwide initiative to disband the Republican Party. And really, it's even more than that, to try to drive out all of the talent from the party.
Yeah.
If you're effective,
you're targeted.
It's obvious. Mm-hmm.
That is exactly just 1,000% what we've seen.
And it's bizarre because, you know, I was raised on a cattle ranch in Northeast Oregon. I was running a small business, single mom. I'd been a PCP, but I'd never run for office before. And suddenly within 6 months, I'm an establishment rhino.
Right.
That's what
Yeah,
they
me
like.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, said that people that are led by somebody who never even voted until 2022.
Yes.
It's beyond absurd.
Mhm.
Melanie, I want to thank you, Scott. She says Scott has been doing amazing work exposing this chaos. He's the only one reporting on this. Please consider subscribing to his Substack. That's at biggertruth.substack.com. Only $50 a year to help support his great work. So thank you, Melanie. I appreciate that, and appreciate the reminder. And Gene says, "Yep, one county at a time."
Yep.
And
we had some screenshots actually pop up. Jake Brown approached a PCP in Umatilla County, counties that's still, you know, pretty solid. And his whole purpose was to try to get her to turn against her county chair so that they could start ousting that county chair and do what they did to Baker County. So they're pretty open about it at this point, what their goals are.
Right.
Yeah.
Cindy says, please tell these people not to give up. Yeah. And
I'm not going anywhere. I'm running for re-election.
Sweet.
Good.
And Cindy also asked if I could find it. Okay. So this was a question for you, Kerry. Does the mayor expect to be reelected? So are you still the mayor?
No, my term ended.
Okay. And then you ran for governor in 2022, right?
Governor, yes. And I've been working as a senior advisor with Republicans overseas ever since. And one of the ways that we're kind of working around the chaos is several folks and I have just formed a nonprofit in the state of Oregon, and we have some very good people coming on board with that. We've been raising funds for it. And our goal, I mean, we need a functional Republican Party. And even if we don't have that, we still have to focus on the platform and getting Republicans elected, registering voters, getting out the. And so our nonprofit will be involved in that.
Yep.
So these groups, I mean, for them to be appointing Don Powers, that means that they are on his team, right? I mean,
yeah.
So the state is really under their control. Is that right?
Yes.
Not all. They're still, if you look at the amount of the delegates that he had under control at the last election, he still does not have the majority.
Okay.
You know, there's time for the majority of the delegates to wake up and see these folks for what they are. And
what are you finding at conventions? Do they have, are they kind of, they have a kind of a plan going into the convention to create chaos and control the crowd? You see that, especially at state conventions?
Yeah, the last state convention, there was a clear delineation. If you were supporting Don Powers, you were pretty much required to wear his sticker, and so you got to know exactly who was who, because they walk around wearing a badge that says, "I'm with Don." You know, that's not exactly what it said, but yeah. I don't even remember what it said because I didn't care enough to pay attention. And it's true. It is a common theme, if you will, that they travel in a pack, so to speak, and stay close, in a lot of ways, stay close ranked. And you'll see their behavior outside of, meetings resemble that as well. We had a meeting in Marion County where Don and his crowd showed up in matching T-shirts, and literally came in. They all waited outside until there was the full collection of about 15 of them, and they all came in together in one group. And they wanted to be disruptive. I had two sheriff's deputies, one in uniform and one that was a PCP in the meeting, and they literally stood behind that crowd and just waited for them to act up.
Wow.
And they would have been escorted out immediately.
Right. It's unfortunate that you need that, but it's good that you had them there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that you'll notice is the forced conformity. So you'll see that in the Telegram groups that they frequent and that they create. If there's someone in there who has a difference of opinion on any issue, they are pounced on personally. It's the politics of personal destruction. They can't argue the issues. They don't stick to the issues, and you're basically mobbed, insulted, and just frozen out, mocked and ridiculed until you're out of the group. And that's what they do in real life also.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been banned from 5 different groups.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's kind of a badge of honor, really.
Right. Yeah, and so those are in groups in Telegram.
4 Telegram, 1 Facebook.
Right.
Yeah, including by Don himself in one group.
Yep. I'm banned on several of those Telegram groups too.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating stuff. So what about the national? Actually, there's a couple questions before I get to my questions. So Joe says in Michigan at state committee meeting, we had a groin kicking. So, along the lines of assaults, and also a setup where there was a face slap while district chair was videoing the event.
Wow.
So, and like I said, it's happened in more than just that one that I described in Arizona. It's happened quite a bit in Arizona as well. That's a commonly used tactic there as well. Cindy says, does anyone think Steve Bannon or Mike Flynn are responsible for much of this division? And do you want me to answer that? Or what do you think?
See, I may disagree with you on this, just based on some of the Twitter feed posts.
Sure.
I don't think they're responsible. No. I think there are a lot of folks out there on a national scale who may be challenging the status quo, and they may have certain rhetoric that they use, but I don't think so. I think in these groups in Oregon, I think some of them, and in other states also, are brought here deliberately and directly to create chaos. And then it grows and people get associated with them. And as they network and they leverage their titles, they reach out to certain people and the rhetoric sounds like a match. And so other people get involved. And then you get a whole conglomeration of different folks. I mean, I know in Oregon, some of the people that they've looped into their group are they're good people who don't know how to vet candidates. They have relatively low discernment, and they cannot believe that there's a group of people who sit back and deliberately think of ways to trash and destroy people and lie, because normal people don't do that. It's so far
not normal behavior. No,
it's not normal behavior, and people can't accept that someone literally sits there in a room and laughs. Well, what can we do to hurt this person the most? Normal people don't do this. And so they get all sorts of people from different areas coming into this. That's what
and normal people give people the benefit of the doubt too.
Yes.
And believe people for their word. And
it gets taken advantage of.
Yes.
And I've had conversations with people who are like, I'm here to make a difference and I want to do these things and I don't want to see stuff, be the same. And I don't either. And frankly, under that definition, I'm a disruptor. Okay. I disrupted the status quo in Marion County. It was very much a do nothing county, and people complained and drifted in and then saw nothing happening and left. And so, and we've had, as a result of this and other events, and the tension of all of that, we've had a big changeover in the PCPs from 2 years ago to now, in terms of we have about the same number, but it's about a 70% different crowd than it was. And these are folks who know who I am and understand what I'm about and support it.
Good. I would say, just to speak to Holly's point briefly, that so Joel Altman, that connection with Joel Altman is very interesting. Joel Altman is associated with the Mike Flynn Podcaster Network. And that is something that I've talked about a little bit, but that's a very deliberate network that Flynn has created with the help of Clay Clark and others and Vandersteel. And Joel Altman is very close with Ann Vandersteel. So, to say that they're responsible for much of the division, that's a difficult thing to prove. But I know that a lot of the narratives that they use, like Kerry, you mentioned the status quo, the status quo has got to go. That's a big part of the narrative that these people use. And so what I don't know is whether or not Steve Bannon is a witting or unwitting participant in that, but he certainly has done a lot to advance the narratives that are largely false, even, and that are really used by this movement nationwide. And principally his work with Dan Schultz and the precinct strategy, which was a nationwide recruiting effort for delegates, for people to become precinct delegates, and to kick out the rhinos. And that was Dan Schultz's message. And he was on Steve Bannon's show almost every week starting in February of 21. So, there is some responsibility, whether they're unwitting or unwitting players in that, I just don't know. But I do believe that Flynn is at the top of this.
One thing though, about the Reawaken tour that Joel mentioned, was talking about. So Mike Flynn was at the Reawaken tour, and he was actually in the tent with me and Solomon, and he and his folks were aware when Don Powers and Mark Thielman and his group got kicked out of the event, basically because they violated security protocols.
Yeah.
I mean, they marched into the green room where we were meeting with Eric Trump, and Joel was taking pictures, and they had no clearance to be there. And so they got removed. And I know when Mike Flynn and his crew started digging around online and looking up, Mark Thielman and people associated with that campaign, they did distance themselves through that event and didn't allow photos to be taken with him. And so when they found out what they were dealing with, they went, whoa, and backed off. So got to give him credit for that.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So, effigy. This is a good one. So Gene's the effigy. So I'd let you guys explain that.
So go ahead.
The effigy, just go ahead.
Yeah.
So this was after the trumped up fake recall effort where they put together 35 pages of absolute garbage against Solomon. So you have to understand, Solomon Yu escaped communist China with his life. I mean, just barely. And they've been attacking him, saying he's a communist spy. The racist overtones to this are something else. And this is something that I don't use lightly, and I have never seen in the Republican Party, prior to this. But Don Powers decided it would be funny. That's his word, funny, to create an effigy of Solomon with a Recall Saul t-shirt, put it in the back of his pickup truck, and parade it around Central Oregon. And so when we got into Madras, Oregon, my phone started blowing up. There's a stretch of the road where there's no cell phone coverage.
In case you want to know what it looks like.
Oh, yeah. Fabulous.
Yeah, that's grotesque.
Yeah. And so the phone started blowing up, and people were hearing that the KKK had rolled into Madras. And we walk into a restaurant, the restaurant staff, the hotel staff, they're all talking about this racist effigy in the back of this pickup truck. And it's a Republican Central Committee meeting. We had people we knew in
state committee meeting
instantly re-register from Republican to independent or non-affiliated. Just leave the party because of that effigy. So a couple meetings later, we had a text to our Black executive director using the N-word, telling him that he and Solomon were on their way out of the party.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just terrible. Yeah. And there is, and that it's terrible.
It's awful.
Yeah. And on Wednesday of next week, I'll have Tatiana Pena, who's the Maricopa County second vice chair, and she'll be on the show. And she actually has some kind of similar allegations in her experience. She's in a 60% Hispanic district, and her district is entirely made up of non-Hispanic white, Caucasians that drive out anyone who comes in that's Hispanic, and including herself. And they do everything they can to destroy anybody that is not like, and it's terrible. So I'd like to talk about, Ours have admitted that they were enticed by Bannon. Yeah, so many delegates nationwide became delegates in 22 because of Bannon. And Cindy says groupthink, T-shirts, and rhyming chants are all a signature of the far left. And yeah, so what you just had your election and kind of mentioned it briefly, but I'd like to hear just a little bit more about how that went. So this was a state convention for RNC committee man, committee woman. The committee woman was reelected. She obviously has ties with Don Powers, like you explained, Joel, at that where they're having that backdoor meeting that she and Ronna McDaniel were involved with Don Powers, and then Don Powers is actually on the verge of being elected, right? And after the first round, he had the lead, as I understand it.
He came in first. There were 4 candidates, and he came in first in the first round. But the idea is to get 50% plus 1 so that you have the greatest number of delegates backing the new person coming into office, right? It's always been that way. A lot of organizations use this structure, this election structure. And so Don came in first in the first round, but nowhere near 50%. So he did not have it. The fourth place guy, then he had the 16, 19. I can't remember how many delegate votes. 16. So he dropped out, and that left 2 in the middle, Solomon, and then a guy who's more moderate than that. And Solomon started adding it up, and he thought he probably could win on the second ballot, but it was an unknown. And so he decided right then it would be better for the party in general and give us 6 more months maybe to fend off this group if he united the room behind a guy named Dan Mason. So he encouraged all of his voters to come in behind Dan in some sort of hope that we could get the party back this fall. So
really self-sacrificial. So then it sounds like everything that I've heard from both of you and also from Susan is that Solomon is just a really good man. Like he's just a good human being.
He's a seriously stand-up guy. Yeah,
he's a very good man.
Yeah.
And he has been smeared by this group up one side and down the other for 2 years straight. And we have Don on audio admitting that his purpose coming into this party was for 2 years to get rid of Solomon.
Yeah,
that's
entire reason for him being here.
Why do you think?
Because he's effective.
Well, two reasons. Number one, the RNC convention in 2016, Solomon was effective in keeping Paul Ryan from parachuting into the convention and taking Trump's nomination. And the second reason is Solomon passed through the RNC a resolution holding the Chinese Communist Party responsible for COVID and due $60 trillion in reparations to the United States for that. RNC resolutions often become a legislation or executive orders and become policy of the federal government. And so the number one culprit or the number one suspect to me is the CCP operating through somebody, and intermediaries to get Solomon out of power. When you look at the recall document, the number one reason they were addressing for the recall was so that he would not be able to participate in this summer's RNC convention. That was their number one reason to recall him.
And the whole thing,
I think that puts it to the lie right there.
It's hysterical, though, because these folks are so disconnected from reality that they think that RNC title is what gives somebody skills and connections and a network and the power that they want to take away. They keep saying they want to take away his power. And for Solomon and for me, taking away that RNC title doesn't change anything in either of our lives. It doesn't. What it did is it hurt the ORP party apparatus, because as a party, Oregon just lost its seniority and it will never have that back. It lost its ability to actually structure and affect our platform, which is what Solomon does. He puts these resolutions into place, whips support, gets them passed. They become part of the RNC platform. Trump has picked up the tenets of several of those resolutions, and he mentions them in his speeches at his rallies. Alex Mooney was introducing one of his resolutions in the form of federal legislation. I mean, these things are going somewhere, and that stops for ORP right now. So that's
somebody with a rap sheet that has never been involved, never even voted in any election. They don't just wake up one day and say, my goal in life is to unseat the RNC chair of my state. Most people have no idea what the RNC chair does. Yes. Like that's just it is so absurd that he would just wake up one day and say this is his goal. And that is absolutely fascinating, especially in light of Solomon really opposing the CCP like that. That's crazy. So what's the path to taking back the state? What's, I know that's your goal. And so what's, how are you doing in that? How can we help, if nothing more, in our prayers?
So two things that come to mind. First, it's recognizing the signs and symptoms, the red flags of these groups when you start to see them, and then knowing how to combat them. The general public needs to be aware of this, and people affiliated with the party structure need to be aware. And one of the things you're going to see first is that they do not attack the far left. They do not attack Democrats.
Almost never.
Never. They attack fellow Republicans. They go right hunting. So if there's someone they agree with on policy 85% of the time, they will target them and out. Even 100% of the time. They can't point to a single vote I made on city council that they would have disagreed with, but I'm, targeted for destruction here.
Right.
So that's one of the things you're going to see. The other thing you'll see when they take over a party is the fundraising, the amount of money goes in the bank depletes. They're not focused on registering voters. They're focused on things that don't have any concrete outcome. You see that happening. Joel, do you think of anything else that you see?
Yeah, it's a lot. Usually sound and fury. They like rallies and flag waves, things that don't really move the needle. And there'll be a lot of talk about that. And then what really effectively works to stop them is to just say no and not respond to them. So in my case, in November last year, there was going to be a surprise censure resolution against me that was brought up by some of these folks, and including our vice chair was participating in that. And anyway, they were living and dying by Robert's rules. Well, I'm pretty good at following rules. I wrote contracts for the federal government for more than a decade, and so I read the book. And when they tried to make their move, I just shut them down using the same rule set that they tried to manipulate. And that really is it. It is know the rules and act honestly and openly. When we do elections in the fall, we'll have question and answer sessions for all the people electing, and I'll spend all the time answering questions from everybody over the last couple of years. And the openness and the transparency is what really pushes them out, because they can't operate there.
Right.
And the other thing is to not believe something just because it's true. So, I mean, they're making up things out of thin air. So one of the things, like Jake made a video about my mom. She took $1,200 in cash out of the account illegally. No, she had donated. But if you're new and you don't have that ability, you don't know what OrStar looks like. Don't know what you're reading. Oh gosh, this person's awful. They're a rhino. Learn to ask questions. I mean, drill down into this. Really, what did this person do?
Yeah, be specific. Give me specifics.
Give me proof. And every time they will tell you, I have proof. I'll provide the proof. I have it. I have so much of it. I have credible witnesses on the ground. That's the other phrase. They love that. I have 2 patriot witnesses. They like to toss that in there. We, the people, have seen this. Okay, show me. And they can't. They never can.
Right.
But people, because they're trusting and they don't understand the amount of evil they're looking at, they don't dig. And we have to start training our voters to dig down and ask these questions. So that's huge.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not just the guys named Fauci that are the problem.
That's right. And it's pretty crazy how, so many people, especially voters, I think that aren't involved in the party, they're just completely confused by what's going on in the party. Then they know that there's conflict because the media on the left loves to report about the conflict, but they don't know what's going on. And when they do hear, they hear completely opposite sides of the story. So they don't know what's true and what's not. They don't know who to believe. And if they have any friends that are wrapped up in believing, and siding with this cult, then, it's just, it becomes even harder for them. So yeah, it's crazy. The way that it's not just that they're pathological liars. They lie fluidly. It's just like they don't even look like they're lying when they lie, because they're so practiced at it. And it's wild how that's happening within the Republican Party with such frequency in so many states. So, in Oregon, we've got, really a deep blue state.
Not so much.
Okay.
So this is the drumbeat that I do. So the Oregon House could have been flipped last cycle with 4,276 more votes across 6 districts. All right. 126,000 Republicans did not vote, which is more than enough, no matter how you smear them around, to flip the Oregon House to Republican. All right. If they'd have voted, we would have a Republican governor as well right now. And so it is the demoralization of Republicans and conservatives that is keeping Oregon blue. It is not the blue voters. We are not outnumbered. We really are not. According to the Democrats' own numbers, there's 1.3 million conservative voters in Oregon and 1.1 million liberal voters in Oregon. That's their numbers, not mine. Okay. So it is a matter of survival for the Democrats to keep conservatives demoralized.
And the your vote doesn't count narrative that we hear.
Yes.
Election integrity.
From the election integrity people.
It is literally telling people you might as well not even turn in your ballot.
Yep.
And that's taken root in Oregon, and people buy it, and it's completely false. I mean, even President Trump, I have heard him physically in front of me say 2 different times that we need to outvote the cheating. Yes. There's cheating. If you believe there's cheating, great. We still have the ability to outvote that. And these folks are saying the exact opposite.
Yeah, that there's no chance, there's no hope, there's no point in voting until we fix the machines or get rid of the machines. It's so stupid, because you can't get rid of the machines unless you elect Republicans.
Unless you vote.
Yeah.
And we put the lie to that last year in Marion County by winning over 90% of our races in what is considered a 50-50 county.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So when's the deadline? Has the deadline already passed in Oregon to sign up to file to become a PCP?
Yes, it is, but you can still do a SEL 105D or Delta and become a write-in voter or write-in candidate to be PCP. And you can do that up until 8 p.m. on May 21st, which is the primary day.
Good. So you still have time. And so how can people get a hold of you if anybody's listening in Oregon and they want to do this, they're not a PCP, or they want to just get involved and help saving the party? How can they get a hold of you guys?
The best way to get a hold of me is through the Marion County website, which is marioncountygop.org. And there's a phone number there and emails that you can use to get to me.
Okay. Great.
KerryMcQuisten.com.
Great.
Easy.
Awesome. So for as far as the Bigger Truth podcast, we've got some really great episodes coming up tomorrow. I'm going to be interviewing Paul Hudson. He's a candidate for U.S. Congress for the U.S. House in Kent County area in Michigan. And I've reported
Grand Rapids.
Yep, Grand Rapids, exactly. And so I've reported on that some of the controversies there with the Republican Party in that area. I like Paul quite a bit. I'm really looking forward to that interview. Then next week I'll be a guest on Garrett Soldado's show, the Grassroots Army, on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Love to see you guys there. That Garrett's got a big following, and it's a lot of the grassroots type around in 22 if you're in Arizona. So, and he's recently come out saying, we got to get behind Pete Hoekstra. We got to stop fighting with each other. Let's just get in line. Let's win this thing. And he's just being
winning is
for it.
Winning is the most important thing. Yeah. Just one of the reasons why I bumped into you, Scott, is because I grew up in Michigan, in Lake Orion.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's only about a half hour for me. So yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Super. So yeah, so you know Michigan, the politics, what's going on here. So
yep.
So that's great.
Yep. Jimmy Hoffa's hometown. Lake Orion, Michigan.
Yeah. It's so next week also I've got two big shows in Arizona. On Wednesday and Friday, I'm rescheduling with Candace Zarni. She's the LD3 chair, the chair of the largest district in Arizona. She's got an incredible story to tell. We're going to be talking about all of the players in Arizona, and naming names. That's going to be on Friday. So we're doing that Friday at 11 o'clock Arizona time. And then we have Tatiana on Wednesday. Both of those are going to be just huge. So I've been wanting to do those shows now for weeks, and I'm thrilled that they agreed to come on. This has been just a great experience talking with you. Like Trump 24 said at the beginning, 15 minutes in, and the parallels are just like it's just like 3-alarm fire. And this is a nationwide operation. It could not be more clear. And I think that this episode, perhaps more than any other that I've done, really underscores that. And I'm really appreciative to have you guys on here. And it's also clear that you see the language, and you see how important it is to identify these people. That it's not just going to go away on its own. You have to actually teach people how to identify their behavior, their tactics, and their language, so that you can then root them out. Because it's not just you guys that's going to root them out. It's going to be the people, the voters, all the PCPs, and new PCPs coming in to replace these people that have created the problem. So I wish you guys all the best, and I completely agree with Cindy. This is just a great show, and
thank you.
I would love to have an update from you guys after May, after the primary, and see how things are going. Sure. It would be great to talk to you again. So thank you very much. And thank you all for joining. If you guys want to stay on just a second here.